road less traveled, an offshoot of the more heavily used Oregon Trail, a route that stretched from near present-day Casper, Wyoming, past the eastern flank of the Bighorn Mountain, then westward to the Yellowstone River, and on to the gold fields of Montana Territory.
The Bozeman Trail started in the midst of the Civil War and ended in 1868, just 1 year before the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad.
It was the last of the great gold rush trails, a shortcut to dreams of fame and fortune.
The allure of the most recent gold strike and being there at the beginning, hopefully being able to find a good claim, was a strong incentive for these people to move west and to move relatively quickly.
You always will have entrepreneurs and people interested in figuring out ways to get there faster. And I think gold rushes in themselves have a nature of speed.
It was a landscape traversed by a cast of characters that are Western legend.
Some of the most diverse peoples of our Western history were here or came through or lived here.
It was a terrain rich in grassland and teeming with wildlife. Tribal land.
So this was prime habitat for game, for living, and it was worth fighting for and dying for.
The buffalo was our whole livelihood. I mean, that was our home, our clothes, our shields.
These competing aspirations, traditions, and expectations would lead to a clash of cultures.
The perspective of the Lakota is this is our home and we want to protect it. And the perspective of the people on the Bozeman Trail are, we just want to get to the gold fields. And then the attitude of the federal government, well, maybe we need to protect these people.
As a result, military forts were built. Treaties were broken.
I have said 3 or 4 times that the document that you have before you is not the document that I agreed to. I did not agree to this treaty.
And war erupted.
It was the beginning of the Indian Wars here and the beginning of the real heavy bloodshed.
They had no idea there were 1,500 Indians waiting in a well-staged ambush.
There's multiple year-long investigations from the Army and from Congress and from the Office of Indian Affairs trying to figure out what happened.
It was the beginning, for some, of a bright new future. And for others, the end of a traditional way of life. This road less traveled, this rush to the gold fields of Montana and the Indian wars that followed, is the story of the Bozeman Trail.
Production of the Bozeman Trail, A Rush to Montana's Gold, was made possible in part by the Big Sky Film Grant, a grant from Humanities Montana, an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and funding from the Wyoming Humanities Council, helping Wyoming take a closer look at life through the humanities. This project was also made possible with the support of the Gilhausen Family Foundation, the Rocky Mountain Power Foundation, a division of Pacific Corp, and grants from the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, a program of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. The Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communication on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans. And the Wyoming Community Foundation, connecting people who care with causes that matter to build a better Wyoming.
On a warm July day in 1862, John White leads a ragtag group of Colorado prospectors up a creek teeming with grasshoppers in the vast Idaho Territory. The Lewis and Clark expedition had named the waterway Willard Creek more than 50 years earlier. Cursing the hordes of insects, they rename it Grasshopper Creek. But curses soon turn to jubilation, washing the creek-bed gravels in their tin pans. They immediately see color, pay dirt. News of the strike and outrageous rumors travel fast. People say you can pull up some sagebrush, shake out the roots, and collect a pan's worth of gold. By fall, more than 400 fortune seekers descend on the place now called Bannock. Among them is a tall 26-year-old Georgian named John Bozeman. John Merriam Bozeman had left his wife and 3 small children in Pickens County, Georgia, 2 years earlier. Unable to strike it rich at the Pikes Peak gold rush, he journeyed further west.
It was not uncommon for the head of a family to leave the family and go west to seek opportunity with the goal of ultimately relocating, either coming back with wealth to the family back east or having the whole family eventually relocate.
But Bozeman would never see his family again. Bannock quickly becomes the epitome of a Wild West mining boomtown, a volatile mix of rough, dirty work, free-flowing liquor, guns, gambling, and lawlessness.
I don't know how many deaths have occurred this winter, but that there have not been twice as many is entirely owing to the fact that drunken men do not shoot well. Emily Meredith.
By January 1863, bitter temperatures and 30 inches of snow blanket the fledgling gold fields, and all mining comes to a standstill. As John Bozeman huddles close to the fire, he lays out an idea for a shortcut to the gold fields. A bulky mountain man sitting across from him listens intently. Bozeman envisions a new route that will help gold-seeking immigrants reach the mines faster than by taking the longer Oregon Trail, then northward past Fort Hall. Bozeman believes immigrants will pay hard cash to be led up this golden trail. Certainly, it has to be more lucrative than their unproductive claims and the numbing drudgery of placer mining. John Jacobs slowly nods his head in agreement. They will start out as soon as the snows begin to diminish in the spring. 1,500 miles away, at a Union Army prisoner of war camp in Indiana, Henry B.B. Carrington stacks the paperwork at his desk. As the Civil War rages on, the Army colonel calculates his next move up the military hierarchy once this awful carnage is over. Opportunities look ripe for advancement in the western frontier. In a teepee on the western plains, a Lakota warrior bites off a piece of pemmican and slowly chews, deep in thought. Red Cloud worries about more white-skinned people rolling across the land again when the spring grasses begin to grow. He remembers the damage that they had done in previous years and prays the Great Spirit will keep out the invaders, heal the land, and favor his people with abundant buffalo. In time, the plans, thoughts, and prayers of these 3 men will intersect, and the consequences of their actions will have surprising outcomes. Over the next 5 years, one of these men will fall into disgrace. Another will reign triumphant. The third will be dead. And this part of the American West will change forever. In the spring of 1863, as John Bozeman and John Jacobs set out east on their journey to discover a new route to the gold fields, another trail-worn group of prospectors head west towards Bannock. Among them are Bill Fairweather and Henry Edgar. They have been traveling for nearly 3 months, and after many mishaps and no luck in their search for gold, just want to get back to some form of civilization. Camping alongside a small alder-choked stream some 60 miles east of Bannock, Bill Fairweather shovels some dirt into Edgar's pan and says, "Now go wash that pan and see if you can get enough to buy some tobacco when we get to town." Edgar's eyes widen as he looks at the bottom of his pan. The contents shimmer back at him as in a dream. Returning to Bannock a few days later, the group try their best to keep their discovery secret, but their gold doesn't look like Grasshopper Creek gold. After filing their claims, huge numbers of miners follow them back to their site. Soon a string of 9 mining camps erupt along Alder Gulch. It becomes known as 14 Mile City, with Virginia City being the largest.
We're at the Discovery Monument. This is the spot, the exact spot where Fairweather discovered gold in May 26, 1863. This find of gold at Alder Gulch has been claimed by some to be the richest that was ever found in the world. Regarding the size and value of the gold found in such a small space.
As the find at Alder Gulch unfolded, Bozeman and Jacobs were struggling to find a pathway.
Indians approached them, took most of their supplies, took their horses, left them with nothing, basically. Jacobs and Bozeman kept going south and finally made it to the Platte Road.
They stumbled into Deer Creek Station at the end of May, half-starved and exhausted. Deer Creek Station, at present-day Glen Rock, Wyoming, consisted of a trading post, a detachment of cavalry, and a telegraph station. Ironically, if Bozeman had never left Bannock that spring, he could have been among the first to strike it rich at Alder Gulch. Luck seemed to elude him time and time again. After recuperating, Bozeman and Jacobs by mid-June of 1863 were recruiting wagons along the Oregon Trail, persuading them to take this new shorter route to the gold fields, claiming it would shave hundreds of miles off the trip.
Some of us are thinking of taking this new cutoff to Bannock City. It is a new route, part of which has never been traveled over in wagons. But it is from 300 to 500 miles nearer than any other route. It is, however, attended with some disadvantages in the opening of a road, etc. It is also more or less dangerous being through the heart of Indian country. At least a month or 6 weeks of travel saved by going through. Sam Word.
In early July, Bozeman and Jacobs put together a wagon train consisting of about 46 wagons and 90 people. It left for the gold fields on July 6, 1863. By July 20th, the group had traveled about 140 miles to Rock Creek, just north of present-day Buffalo, Wyoming.
This is Rock Creek. We believe it's the Rock Creek crossing of the Bozeman Trail. And it is marked that way. John Bozeman's first trip in 1863 was stopped here and gathered here with his wagon train. A large group of Native Americans came to him and said, "You need to stop here."
They come, they said, to warn us not to proceed further through their country, that they were combined to prevent a road being opened through here, that if we went on, we would be destroyed, that they would be our enemies, that if we turned back, they would not disturb us. Sam Word.
That evening, the train held a meeting to decide what to do. John Jacobs and the other guides lobbied to turn back, believing the small train would be vulnerable. Bozeman wanted to go forward. In the end, most of the immigrants voted to return to the safety of the Oregon Trail. But before they broke camp the next day, there was trouble. A grizzly bear appeared in the brush, and some of the men took up their guns and went after it.
In the forenoon, a large grizzly bear approached our camp. 15 to 20 went out to give him a fight. They wounded him. He charged upon the nearest of them from the bushes and hurt 2 men badly. Knocked them both down, gashed one's head to the skull badly, and tore off the underlip and part of the jaw of one man. Sam Word.
But it wasn't just a bear that provided trouble in Bozeman's 1863 train. 2 of the immigrants were challenging the morality of a few of the women in the group.
There being a couple in the train who, according to some of the matrons, should long since have been in wedlock's bonds. Bozeman kindly consented to mitigate the scandal by tying the nuptial knot one bright evening at the head of the corral. James Kirkpatrick.
As the immigrants headed back south, their camaraderie began to evaporate.
Our train is getting more and more split up. I look for it to divide soon. Looks like they cannot agree and work together. I wished I were back on the Platte. Sam Word.
Adding to the discord, Bozeman and 9 others from the group chose to continue to the gold fields, riding by night to avoid detection by the Indians. Instead of skirting the flank of the mountains, they traveled through the rugged bighorns to further conceal themselves. Along the way, they lost a pack horse and much of their provisions. After 21 arduous days, half starving, they finally reached a mountain pass overlooking a fertile valley. The weary travelers were so happy to have made it out alive, they named it Bozeman Pass and rode triumphant into the Gallatin Valley. The rest of the wagon train took a circuitous route southwest back to the Oregon Trail, emerging near Red Buttes, Wyoming. Disgruntled and angry, the gold seekers continued their journey, now even longer than if they had avoided the cutoff.
It makes me sick to think of it. Lose a month and travel 300 miles for nothing. Sam Word.
They finally made it to Alder Gulch and newly sprouted Virginia City on September 27, some 50 days later. The Bozeman Trail, it seemed, was a failure. The Bozeman Trail will return in a moment. Please support your PBS station by becoming a member and pledging your financial gift to keep programs like this on the air.
We welcome you to the Montana PBS studio, and we're enjoying this film right along with all of you. And don't go away, there's a lot more of the Bozeman Trail to come. And in fact, it doesn't end there with the Bozeman Trail. In fact, it's kind of, at this point, it suggests that maybe the Bozeman Trail is not going anywhere, but there's a lot more to go. My name is Aaron Pruitt. I'm the general manager here at Montana PBS, and we have a special guest with us tonight, producer, director, and editor of the film, Tom Manning. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah.
Not the editor.
Yeah, well, not the editor, sorry, yes, right. But director, producer, so thank you so much for that, and the writing of the film. And it's a great story, and we're just delighted to be able to share it with you this evening. And we also have with us...
I'm Christina Martin. I'm the Director of Development here at Montana PBS in Bozeman.
And behind us, actually, the Delta Gamma fraternity, who have volunteered their time to answer the phones and to take your pledges when you call and support Montana PBS, and to help us support not only this film, but future films like the Bozeman Trail. And that's how things work here at Montana PBS. We bring you these great Montana history programs, and we're only able to do so with your assistance. So please call the number that's there on your screen right now, and we'll tell you how we can say thank you with our special thank you gifts. The number to call is 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS. Newman's Own Foundation knows the value of independent public media, and now they're challenging you to make an ongoing monthly donation to Montana PBS by becoming a sustaining member. For every new sustainer, they'll match the donation dollar for dollar. With your support, we can continue bringing your favorite shows, channels, and experiences right to you. Giving back has never been easier. So call us today or go to the website to set up your monthly donation as a new sustaining member and double your impact.
So we have a really incredible opportunity tonight. So the Newman's Own Foundation has agreed to match the donations of every new sustainer in 2019 up to a total of $50,000. That means that if you call in tonight and become a sustaining member of Montana PBS, you double your dollars. It's an amazing opportunity, it really is. So call now, double your impact, call and become a sustaining member of Montana PBS. The number is 1-800-426-8243.
Actually, we have another match. Actually, I'll talk about a little bit is too.
That's right, related to our
these
volunteers.
volunteer phone operators, and we've had a couple phone calls. Thank you so much for those calls. They're here volunteering their time, but they've also, as the Delta Gamma fraternity, have agreed to match any pledges tonight from Delta Gamma alum around the state of Montana. So when you call in tonight, you can not only double your pledge with the Newman's Own match, but also with the Delta Gam alums here, they're going to also provide a match. So a great way to support Montana PBS, and they're supporting it, Montana PBS, because they will love the storytelling and the storytellers we bring to Montana PBS. So thanks for being here and being a part of that as well. Tell me a little bit about how did the Bozeman Trail get started?
Well,
as an idea for a film, not necessarily. We saw how the Bozeman Trail got started.
I had just finished up my last documentary, Blizzard of 49, for Wyoming PBS, and I was talking to the general manager about another production, and he said he had been meeting with the people from the Bozeman Trail and Fort Phil Kearny Association, and they thought it would be a great thing to do a documentary on the Bozeman Trail. And Terry thought it'd be a great idea to partner with Montana PBS, since the Bozeman Trail indeed goes through Wyoming and Montana. And so I said I'd take a look at it, and I thought, well, maybe the Bozeman Trail would be interesting, about a bunch of pioneers coming to look for gold in Montana. But the more I researched it, the more interesting it got, because it wasn't just about the pioneers and the gold, although that, was the crux of the story. But there were other legs to the story also, in that the Native Americans clearly did not want folks coming through their land. It had been getting stripped away, ever since the beginning of the Oregon Trail, and they didn't want any more people coming through. And then, of course, the military stepped in, and so we had another prong to the story here. So it became this really interesting threefold story about the immigrants, the Native Americans, and the U.S. military, and how this all worked out in the end.
Great job of setting that up early in the film, kind of through the three main characters, John Bozeman, Carrington, who we're going to get to know a little bit from the military, and Red Cloud, and there's a lot more to come. But we're going to come back and visit a bit more with Tom as we go on with the evening. But thank you right now for those pledges and those phone calls that are coming in. And we would like to again remind you some of the special thank you gifts we'll send your way when you pledge your support. The number to call is 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
Through public television, many people are given the opportunity to experience historic programs like this because people across the state of Montana have helped make it possible with their donations. Public television is our nation's most essential voice for preserving and sharing extraordinary stories. That's why I ask you to be a part of the crowd that helps ensure programs like the Bozeman Trail always have a place on public television by becoming a sustaining member of Montana PBS. Your ongoing monthly contribution as a sustainer makes a world of difference to our ability to create and deliver meaningful programs. It is easy to become a sustainer with a monthly commitment of just $10, $12, or even $15 a month through your checking account or credit card. Becoming a sustaining member of Montana PBS makes a world of difference for the future of programs like this and our station. Please call us now, 1-800-426-8243, or give online at montanapbs.org.
Yes, indeed.
It's great to hear those phones ringing.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
it
ringing
is.
off the hook, keeping our volunteers busy.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about what we're going to see coming up in the film.
Well, so Bozeman really didn't quite pull it off in 1863, as we saw. In 1864, he's at it again. He's once again recruiting people. He doesn't have John Jacobson with him this time. He's on it by himself. But in addition to Bozeman, there are other people that are looking for passengers, looking for wagon trains to go on the Bozeman Trail. And among them is a guy named Alan Hurlbut, who's kind of a mysterious figure. He claims to know about secret gold fields, and people kind of gravitate towards that. And then we have a third person that is leading people to the gold fields, and that's Jim Bridger, a Western legend. Bridger, however, is going to do something a little bit different. Hurlbut and Bozeman are going up on the east side of the Bighorn Mountain Range, whereas Bridger goes up along the other side of the mountain range, and he runs into some really tough conditions there. It's very dry, and it's kind of a race, but it really isn't a race because Bridger starts out before Hurlbut and Bozeman do, but they all wind up at the same place, and that is the Gallatin Valley.
We get a sense, I think, too, of how difficult this is with a wagon train and the terrain, the difficulty of getting wagons over this terrain, and the cost for these families. I thought that was interesting that you brought up it takes a lot of investment for a family or individuals to buy a wagon and put all their belongings and go off into this very difficult landscape.
Yeah, it was about $600 to $800, which was quite a sum of money back then.
And then put your trust in a John Bozeman or a Jim Bridger or a Hurlbut.
Yes.
And they were interesting characters as to whether that trust was well placed or not.
Exactly. Bozeman was kind of an unknown to a lot of people. He was as they were coming off the Oregon Trail, he's going, "Come on this way. Let's come with me. I know you can get there faster." Of course, as we heard in the first segment, speed is everything during the gold rush. People that got there the fastest were the ones that struck pay dirt.
Right.
People that were a little bit slower, it just didn't work out for them.
Like John Bozeman, who were mining the miners more than really
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for visiting with us about that. We're going to be talking more with Tom all through the evening about this story and the making of the Bozeman Trail. But first, we have some folks to thank here.
We do. We have some volunteers to thank. We're keeping them busy right now, manning the phones, and thanks to all of you who have contributed already tonight as well. We also have some thank you gifts tonight to talk about.
Yeah.
And they're relevant to the film, actually.
In fact, first and foremost is the film itself. So we'll have the full 90-minute documentary is available on DVD here, and we have a copy of that right here to show you, and that will come your way as a thank you gift when you pledge your support to Montana PBS tonight. And of course, these two great books, I'm excited, and I've been inspired. I was telling Tom earlier that I'm a native Bozemanite. We're both native Bozemanites. I have not read The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, so that's on my list. And if that's something you'd like to read more about, the Bozeman Trail, and we also have a map that we are offering. So those are a few of the ways that we say thank you when you pledge your support to Montana PBS. It's all about tonight this partnership with you and helping Montana PBS continue to tell great stories, whether it's performance and art, whether it's history, whether it's news and public affairs. We bring it to you 24/7 here on Montana PBS into your living rooms. We give you a front row seat to all of that. But it's only possible when you participate in that partnership with Montana PBS and become a member. And tonight, of course, if you become a member and a sustaining member, we have this great match that we'd like you to take advantage of from our phone operators this evening, the Delta Gamma fraternity. They've agreed to match any pledges tonight from Delta Gamma alums. So we look forward to that opportunity. So the number is there on your screen to call. You can also go to montanapbs.org and pledge online. We're about to go back to the film, but thank you again for all of those calls. And we just encourage you to make a pledge, and we'll be watching the show with you. And we encourage you to take a last look at these thank you gifts. The number is 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or The Autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
So in the making of this film, I'm curious, about finding the Bozeman Trail. I mean, physically finding it. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what that's like, because some people wonder, well, where is it exactly, and how can you see anything?
Right. Well, unlike the Oregon Trail, the Bozeman Trail wasn't in existence for very long. So, the Oregon Trail, you can go out and see really deeply cut ruts. The Bozeman Trail is a little trickier. I went out with a couple of Bozeman Trail enthusiasts, and we went to the outback of Montana and did indeed find some faint traces of Bozeman Trail tracks still in existence.
And that's a couple of those places. Is that where you conducted interviews with some of the historians as well then?
That's right. And you got to remember the Bozeman Trail, though, if you're driving the freeways in Montana and Wyoming, you're driving the Bozeman Trail for all practical purposes.
I was traveling recently in Wyoming, and I suddenly realized I want to stop at that historical marker, because now I'm more interested than I was before, paying attention a bit more about the Fetterman Massacre site, which
Yes.
we'll learn a little bit more about, which is a really exciting part of the story, and that's yet ahead of us.
Right.
But there's some great signs and history right there if you just take 20 minutes to get off the interstate and go visit those sites.
That's right.
It kind of points to the interesting collaboration too between Montana and Wyoming in the making of this film, right?
Yeah. It's turned out to be a pretty good partnership. I think. Would you agree, Aaron?
And I didn't realize, again, as a native Bozemanite, I probably should have, but that half of the trail really is in Wyoming and about half of it is in Montana. And so it was a natural partnership for Wyoming PBS and Montana PBS. And having worked with Wyoming PBS, but living here in Bozeman, things just really lined up well.
They did.
Now we're sharing the film with the rest of the state.
Yeah, I can't wait to see more of it. Just a reminder before we cut to the next segment and learn more about the Bozeman Trail, pledge tonight, make your pledge and become a sustaining member of Montana PBS. You can do it online, or our phones are open.
Okay. The number to call is 1-800-426-8243, and we go back to the program.
The route over which John Bozeman attempted to lead that first wagon train followed ancient Indian pathways from thousands of years of habitation. Rock cairns still exist today, marking this great north-south passage.
The old north-south Indian Trail, it was a trail that actually came around the head of the Rocky Mountains up in Alaska, Canada, and then came around and got on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. They went through Canada, Montana, Wyoming, New Mexico.
Probably back as far as 11,000 years, you'll find evidence of continuous inhabitation along particularly the Rocky Mountain regions and the Bighorn regions.
Pictograph Cave is right here. They have documented human occupation at that cave 9,000 years old. This is a transportation hub. This is the superhighway of ancient days.
Eastern Montana and northeastern Wyoming's Powder River Basin was the home and hunting grounds of the Crow Indians for many generations. They were driven out to the northwest in a war with the Lakota Sioux in 1857, who along with the Cheyenne and Arapaho established themselves as the dominant powers in the region. The tribes traveled in unison with the vast bison herds.
The buffalo was our whole livelihood. I mean, that was our home, our clothes, our shields. The buffalo was very much revered, but he was also hunted for food.
But by the mid-1860s, these hunting and cultural traditions of countless generations were about to collide with a powerful industrial force representing a very different vision and value system.
When the Lakota come into Powder River and the Northern Cheyenne and the Arapaho, they feel like they have fought honorably for that land, and that is their land. They don't want any more intrusion because they're very aware of what wagon trains and the military do when they come into a country.
By the 1860s, the Oregon Trail had been established for more than 20 years. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants had journeyed west, wagons, oxen, mules, and horses grinding down the land. The lush grasses grazed down to stubble. Rivers and streams fouled and trampled. Trees and shrubs cut and stripped for fires. The once abundant game hunted for food and sometimes left to rot just for sport.
On several occasions, our wagons had to stop in order for the buffalo to pass. Their low rumbling tramp and peculiar bellowing could be heard at a distance as the advance of a herd approached. This afforded sport for the hunters, who slew them in abundance, more than we actually needed. No wonder the Indian opposed any encroachment of whites into this great game country. His by right of discovery. The buffalo supplied all his wants. Mary Foreman Kelly.
The Indians just saw the natural animal population really deteriorating. The poisoning of water holes, the bringing of dysentery, typhoid, diseases.
The perspective of the Lakota is this is our home and we want to protect it. And the perspective of the people on the Bozeman Trail are we just want to get to the gold fields. And then the attitude of the federal government, well, maybe we need to protect these people.
This volatile mix of competing motives would come to a head during the next 5 years in the Powder River country. The Bozeman Trail became the epicenter of a cultural clash that reverberated through the entire region. A flashpoint that set the stage for direct conflict, resulting in startling victories and crushing defeats. Besides the Oregon Trail, there were a number of routes and transportation options already in place to get to the new gold fields of what would become Montana Territory. But none of them were particularly fast or cheap.
There were stagecoaches that ran through Salt Lake and then north to Virginia City. There were steamboats from Missouri River up to Fort Benton, and then stagecoach south to Helena and Virginia City. There was the Mullen Road from the northwest, from the Pacific. So there were several routes and ways to get there.
But of all the ways to get to the gold fields, the cheapest and most popular by far was by wagon. Buying a wagon and outfitting it for a family of 4 cost about $600 to $800. Wagons were loaded with food and supplies for the trip. Nellie Fletcher, an 1866 traveler, described her mobile pantry.
We have plenty of everything good in our large wagon. We have dried apples, peaches, prunes, and currants, canned peaches, canned green corn, oysters, steamed, I believe. We have 16 quarts of tomato catsup. We have 500-pound sacks of flour, bacon, ham, and codfish, potatoes and butter, plenty of tea, coffee, sugar, and molasses vinegar not left out. We have a little keg of golden syrup, which is very nice.
Other supplies included candles, cooking utensils, dishes, pots, and pans, even sheet iron cook stoves. Tools were also a necessity: axes, saws, spare wagon parts, and of course, firearms.
All the men were well armed with revolvers, rifles in the front seats of the wagons, easily got at in case of use. Plenty of provisions in each wagon, sufficient to last for 6 months. Water kegs and some extra jugs, some of which I was told contained snake bite medicine. I made no further inquiry or investigation. Mary Foreman Kelly.
In the spring of 1864, undaunted by the previous year's failure, John Bozeman readied for another attempt along his shortcut trail. He set out from Richard's Bridge, near present-day Evansville, Wyoming, on June 18, 1864. But his train of about 80 wagons wasn't the first. Prospector Allen Hurlbut, claiming to have knowledge of secret gold fields, left 2 days earlier with an even larger train of 124 wagons. Abraham Voorhees, a farmer from Michigan, was one of the travelers who believed in Hurlbut's golden promises.
Hurlbut is a man of considerable experience as an explorer.
and ex-prospector, having been several times over the mountains and being familiar with the gold region.
Famed guide, trapper, and mountain man Jim Bridger was also in the wagon train to the goldfields business. By the 1860s, Bridger had been roaming the Rocky Mountain region for more than 40 years. He was among the first white men to see the wonders of Yellowstone and the Great Salt Lake, and his tall tales of their marvels were laughed at by fellow trappers. Friendly with many tribes, he spoke several Native American dialects and took Indian wives who bore him children. He knew every inch of the Intermountain West and carried a mental map of it in his head. Later, he drew that map on an animal skin that was copied onto paper by an Army officer.
Jim Bridger had mapped 5 states with about 4-degree accuracy, with no instruments, no training, from what the professionals later surveyed.
Bridger departed for the goldfields on May 20th with about 100 wagons from a point west of Red Butte, blazing a trail to Virginia City on the other side of the Bighorn Mountains.
Bridger's is much more popular, probably from the fact that Bridger is an old and well-known mountaineer, having spent his whole life among the mountains and the Indians and having the reputation of being a reliable man. Franklin Kirkcaldy.
While not quite a race, these shortcuts to the Montana goldfields were in full swing that spring and summer of 1864. On July 2nd, Bozeman caught up with the Hurlbut train, which had stopped to prospect for gold. He had been following the path blazed by Hurlbut for some time, and now as he passed, he was on his own to discover the best way forward.
Bozeman's trained within 6 miles of us and passed by. Good many are wanting to go on, and others want to stay and prospect.
Meanwhile, Bridger's train was struggling through difficult terrain.
Feed and water were most fearfully scarce that we crossed what was almost a desert 70 miles in width, on which we had a tight pinch to get grass for our stock. Howard Stanfield.
On the other side of the Bighorns, Bozeman's wagon train grew even larger at the Bighorn River, with some of Captain Hurlbut's train joining. An estimated 150 wagons now comprise the train.
The captain told a number of us that he knew where there was plenty of gold, but now we begin to think he has fooled us some. And there are a number that will leave the train tomorrow morning without doubt.
The Bighorn River crossing could be difficult, especially early in the season. Sometimes the wagons were caulked and floated across. Other times, days were spent building crude rafts. Later in the year, the flow was lower, making for an easier crossing. After the Bighorn crossing, Bozeman was unsure of the route. Mountain man John Jacobs didn't accompany him this time, and he simply didn't have the knowledge or skills of a Jim Bridger or even Alan Hurlbut.
The trader and speculator and those who have money to work upon profit by the excitement.
As the people in the former Hurlbut wagon train dispersed, Voorhees sold his oxen, said his goodbyes, and within a week booked passage back home with another wagon. His 4-month, 1,700-mile journey to the goldfields seemed to be little more than a sightseeing adventure. With his earlier start and more westward route, Bridger beat everyone. Arriving in early July, he would lead yet another train in the fall and again in subsequent years. Yet, since Bozeman's train was the first to arrive by traveling along the east side of the Bighorn Mountains, the shortcut to Virginia City bears his name to this day. After guiding his wagon train to Virginia City, Bozeman turned around and traveled 60 miles northeast to settle. He arrived at a fledgling community at the east end of the Gallatin Valley. It was inhabited by Daniel Rouse, William Beale, and William Alderson, among others. On August 9, 1864, these men began the process of formally organizing a town. They named it after their friend, Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman and the others recognized it as an ideal spot for wagons to lay over upon entering the Gallatin Valley via the Bozeman Trail. They hoped to make some money in the process. One immigrant who camped there later in 1864 was visited by Bozeman and Rouse, who tried to persuade him to settle there.
They spoke eloquently of its many advantages, its water privileges, and its standing right in the gate of the mountains, ready to swallow up all the tenderfeet that would reach the territory from the east, with their golden fleeces to be taken care of. W.J. Davies.
Bozeman was elected recorder of the district and eventually became probate judge. He would lead no more wagon trains into Montana. 1864 was a big migration year. About 40,000 immigrants traveled the Oregon and California trails to western destinations, including to what had become Montana territory. By contrast, after the initial forays of Bridger, Hurlbut, and Bozeman, only some 1,500 people attempted the Bozeman Trail later that year. Fearing Indians, many people thought it was just too dangerous.
It was here that our train divided. Half of the wagons going on by the way of South Pass, Green River, Soda Springs to Montana, while the rest going north by what was called the Bozeman Cutoff. It was considered a dangerous road to travel. It ran over, through, and across the hunting grounds of the Sioux, who had no love for the palefaces. Mary Foreman Kelly.
The attitude of the immigrants towards the Indians varied from aggressive hatred and fear to interested fascination and even admiration.
This day there was motion put forward and carried in the morning for the indiscriminate slaughter of all Indians, but was reconsidered and acted upon in the evening, and resulted in favor of letting them alone so long as they did not intrude on us. Richard Owens.
There are a great many Indian lodges, or teepees as they call them, all around. We saw a good many Indians, some of them herding their stock and some around their lodges. They have a great many ponies. We saw some of the squaws riding horseback, sitting on the horse man fashion, with their blankets all around them. You ought to see their ornaments. Some wore large bracelets of brass, and some had beads of tin around their arms. They were dressed in style, I tell you. Nellie Fletcher.
About 300 Arapaho Indians are camped near here and came to our camp tonight loaded with furs and robes. And some of the boys struck up a lively trading post. The handsomest robes I ever saw were bought for a pair of common soldier blankets. A cup of flour bought a pair of beaded moccasins, and one man bought a gray wolf robe for 12 matches. Theodore Bailey.
Among all the tribes of the Northwest, the Crow stands first in manliness and physical perfection. They also have pride of race and nation. They can be trusted as friends within its boundaries whenever they are treated with the consideration they deserve. Margaret Carrington.
For some, fear of Native Americans was justified. Even though outright assaults on wagon trains were rare, there were exceptions. On July 7, 1864, the Townsend train, consisted of 150 wagons, was attacked on the Powder River in present-day Wyoming. The Indians even lit a grass fire to burn out the wagons. But the immigrants dug a trench around the circled wagons and filled it with water. After a 6-hour battle with superior weaponry, the immigrants were finally able to fight off the Indians.
The Indians only had bows and arrows. The arrows had iron heads and were very effective at short range. But after they had made a few rushes, our guns had thinned them out and they kept out of range pretty much. We had some long-range guns and kept picking them off and got quite a number of them. We never did know how many. Frank Wager.
The Townsend party lost 4 men in the encounter. 2 were quickly buried, and the other 2 presumed dead. As the next wagon train approached the site of the battle a few weeks later, a horrific scene awaited.
We moved out at 8 this morning, and some of our advance guard came on the body of the man killed. He had been buried by his friends, but the wolves had taken him out and devoured much of his body. We buried him again. Richard Owens.
Besides hostile Indians, the Bozeman Trail immigrants experienced other hardships along the way.
Passed through among barren, desolate region. Grass very scarce, nothing but alkali water with sandy road. Alkali 1/2 inch thick all along the creek. And our only chance for water is to dig through it for water so strongly impregnated with soda to be fit for baking bread. John Hackney.
I shall never forget this camp as the breeding grounds of the mosquito. Dense swarms of these pests attacked us here, making life almost unbearable. The children, the greatest sufferers, swollen hands and faces from the effects of bites. The cattle, restless, difficult to keep together at night especially. Smudges had to be made to keep off the mosquitoes. Mary Foreman Kelly.
Yet all was not misery, misfortune, and social discord. The land and its abundance, its unique vegetation and wildlife, captured the imagination and curiosity of the immigrants.
The country now changed from a dry, waterless plain to well-watered steppes, beautiful hills where there grew the buffalo and grama grasses. Along the banks of the mountain brooks, we gathered the wild strawberry and raspberry. Caught many a fine mess of trout. Mary Foreman Kelly.
Went fishing and caught 30 pounds of fish. Some weighed 2 pounds. 2 men of our party caught 25 pounds. John Hackney.
Prairie dog villages are scattered thickly. Lyman shot one a few days ago. They belong to the marmot species, and as near as I can describe, they are about halfway between the common gray-ground squirrel and the American groundhog or woodchuck. Perry Burgess.
By the time the 1864 travel season was over, thousands of people had made it to the Montana goldfields via the Bridger and Bozeman trails, mostly without incident from the Native American presence. These shortcuts to the mines were beginning to pan out. Then, in the fall of 1864, an event occurred that would soon impact travel on the Bozeman Trail. The Bozeman Trail will return in a moment. Please support your PBS station by becoming a member and pledging your financial gift to keep programs like this on the air.
Welcome back to the studio here at Montana PBS, and don't go away. There's much more of the Bozeman Trail yet to come. My name is Aaron Pruitt. I serve as General Manager here at Montana PBS, and we have a special guest with us, the Director and Producer of the Bozeman Trail, Thomas Manning. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
I'm Christina Martin, Director of Development for Montana PBS.
And we've got a little bit of foreshadowing of some of the challenges that are yet to come on the Bozeman Trail. A little bit of the Native American one attack. There's more to come, and we encourage you to stay with us because you'll learn more about some very significant battles on the trail. So that's yet to come. Yep. We learn a little bit about Jim Bridger, I think is a fascinating character as well. And of course, having been a native Bozemanite myself, knowing a little bit more about that man for those Bridger Mountains and the Bridger Canyon, and fascinating for me to learn how he went north from Livingston, or what was then and the Shields River Valley, and came back down through the Bridger Canyon, and different route than Bozeman took, and that's been really interesting to learn. Right. So that we hope that all of you are enjoying this, and if you're from Montana, if you've been born and raised here, even if you've just moved to Montana and you want to have share this story with others about how Bozeman got started and how this whole region got started, we'd love to send the DVD to you as our way of saying thank you for pledging your support to Montana PBS. Thank you for those phone calls. Thank you very much. The number to call is 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or The Autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS. Newman's Own Foundation knows the value of independent public media, and now they're challenging you to make an ongoing monthly donation to Montana PBS by becoming a sustaining member. For every new sustainer, they'll match the donation dollar for dollar. With your support, we can continue bringing your favorite shows, channels, and experiences right to you. Giving back has never been easier. So call us today or go to the website to set up your monthly donation as a new sustaining member and double your impact. Newman's Own Foundation will match the donations of every new sustainer in 2019, up to a total of $50,000. You can double the impact of your gift by becoming a sustaining member today. You also form a strong foundation of reliable support with your ongoing monthly donation to Montana PBS. You're able to double the difference you can by becoming a sustaining member today. We know that you care for this station, programming, and your communities in Montana. There simply isn't an easier way to do your part to keep your favorite shows on air. Your monthly contributions will automatically come out of your checking account or credit card, so your membership won't expire. This takes all of us working together and your monthly donation. Call 1-800-426-8243 or go online and sign up as a sustaining member now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of the film. I'd like to hear in particular, Tom, tell us a little bit more about John Bozeman, the man. He was a charismatic figure.
He really was. 6'2", 200 pounds, handsome man. Always wore that kind of riverboat gambling outfit, and he indeed liked to gamble. With cards, he gambled with his life. He had interests in flour mills in Bozeman. He was always the entrepreneur. He's always looking for the next big strike. He failed in the gold fields. He just couldn't make it. So then, of course, he went on to, wagon trains, trying to make a buck there. And he even lived in a shack by Bridger's Crossing on the Yellowstone River and ran a ferry there, charging people to cross the Yellowstone on a ferry. So he was really the man about town. And when we heard in the previous segment, Beale and these are, for folks that live in Bozeman, these are street names.
Alderson, Rouse.
Streets we grew up on.
Yep.
Exactly right. So John Bozeman was a fascinating man. He's really kind of enigmatic, I guess is the right word.
It's going to be interesting that all those people and Nelson Story and in Alderson, Rouse, Beale, but they're the ones apparently that kind of decided that the town of Bozeman would be named Bozeman. Right. And there must have been something about John Bozeman that
I think he
inspired
was really magnetic. He had a lot of friends. I think he had a few enemies too. But I think people genuinely liked John Bozeman.
Well, thanks so much again for watching with us and making those phones ring tonight. This is your opportunity to support great storytelling on Montana PBS. And this is the way that we support these programs. This is the way that we make them, whether it's the Backroads of Montana, the music films that we make, 11th and Grant, the Dorothy Johnson film. I mentioned before that the Bloody Bozeman here, which was a resource for you in the making of this film.
Absolutely.
But we've done a wonderful film about Dorothy Johnson that we also broadcast. All of those are possible here at Montana PBS because of the partnership we have with you, our viewers, our members and those of you that pledge. We have about 16,000 members in the state of Montana, which is wonderful, and we're so excited that many people in the state of Montana support us. But we know there's many, many more folks in Montana that maybe have watched, maybe are watching tonight and have never become a member of Montana PBS. So we encourage you to give us a call, and in fact, our phone operators tonight have put a challenge for you. If you're a Delta Gamma alumni, tonight they will match your pledge to Montana PBS. So we thank them for volunteering their time, and we encourage you to pledge your support to Montana PBS. The number is there on your screen to call. The number is 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
There was a little foreshadowing in the last segment about something in the fall of 1864 that was going to happen that was going to kind of change everything. And it didn't even happen in Bozeman it happened in Montana or then Wyoming. It happened somewhere else.
It happened in Colorado. And it was a massacre by Colonel John Chivington, and an all-volunteer army went into Black Kettle's peaceful Arapaho village and basically massacred women, children. It was a horrible thing.
Known as Sand Creek is another.
Known as Sand Creek Massacre, right. And this was the beginning of the Indians, the Native Americans, really galvanizing against the people coming up the Bozeman Trail. The horror of it all just really pulled them together. A lot of the people from Sand Creek moved north up into the Powder River country, where the great Cheyenne leader, Lakota leader Red Cloud really helped galvanize the tribes, galvanize the Cheyenne, the Northern Arapaho, and the Lakota Sioux against further incursion into the Bozeman Trail.
We're about to learn a lot about how Red Cloud is obviously a major character in defining the Bozeman Trail and defining, well, I won't give it away, but the future of the Bozeman Trail.
Indeed.
Well, we have some thank yous to give as well.
We do. We have some thank yous. Judith from Kalispell, thank you so much for becoming a member of PBS tonight. Thank you. And Terry from Victor, Montana, we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Patricia from Livingston, thank you for your pledge this evening here to Montana PBS.
Jeff and Mary in Montana City, thank you for supporting local storytelling. I also have Sandra from Bozeman. Thanks so much for your pledge tonight.
Keep those phones ringing for the rest of you out there who haven't called in yet or made your pledge. Please call 800-426-8243. Make your pledge now to Montana PBS.
And this is really how it works for public television. It's individuals like you. It's like these people that we're thanking now. It's pledge by pledge, call by call, pledge online. It's every one of those single individual small pledges that makes Montana PBS possible for us to bring you the national programming, whether it's the News Hour, Masterpiece, American Experience, or the Montana Experience, which through the Bozeman Trail. This is really how it works, pledge by pledge, member by member. We also want to thank our volunteer phone operators. They are all really busy right now, which is great here. The Delta Gamma alums here, and they have actually offered a match this evening for any other Delta Gamma alums in the state of Montana, any Delta Gamma members in the state of Montana. They will match your pledge tonight when you pledge and make a call in this evening, so please do that right now. The number to call is right there on your screen. We ask you to give us a call right now. It's 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
So as we come back into the film, we're going to be at about 1864, fall of 1864, 65.
That's correct.
And what happens, or give us a little foreshadowing. We have just a moment or so.
Right. Well, the military starts to move in to help protect the people on the Bozeman Trail. And of course, battles ensue. There's a couple of major battles with quite surprising outcomes.
And John Bozeman isn't a part of any of this. He settled down in Bozeman.
That's right.
So
that's right. But he still figures into the next part of the story also.
Yeah. So that's yet to come. And again, we thank you, all of you that are members of Montana PBS, that have perhaps, if you're not a member already, we would hope you'll call in this evening. Perhaps it's time to renew your membership. We encourage you to become a sustaining member of Montana PBS. That's one way that we are able to plan ahead and know what the resources we have available to Montana PBS for our next projects. So if you could become a sustaining member this evening, we have those thank you gifts. We have these great books, Red Cloud, The Bloody Bozeman, and actually one of the things we haven't shared yet is this wonderful map. That's one of the thank you gifts. And this is for a pledge this evening. We will send that your way at the different levels that you've seen there on your screen. Just our way of saying thank you. This is, we purchased these items at a fairly low cost, and the reason that we're able to send them to you is the difference is what we keep here at Montana PBS, and it funds our operations. It literally keeps us on the air. It pays the bill to National PBS, and it funds these individual local productions like the Bozeman Trail. That's how it works. It's pretty simple here at Montana PBS and how we fund it, and it all comes back to you. 16,000 members. We'd love that to be 18 or 20 or 30,000 members in Montana that support this service. And it's kind of how, during these pledge drives, as we only come to you twice a year, and this is how we communicate to you, and this is how we actually acquire new members. And it's during these pledge drives. Many stations pledge 4 or 5 times a year. Here in Montana, we've made a point to do it only twice a year. So this is your opportunity to support us. And if you are one of those viewers that loves pledge drives, that's wonderful, and we're glad you enjoyed it. But if you're one of those viewers that's also looking for the pledge drive to be over as soon as possible to get back to regular programming, that's okay too. And of course, when you pledge tonight, you help us come to the end of the pledge drive and return to regular programming. And of course, we love to have you enjoy both programs like this and the national PBS shows like Victoria, American Experience, Backroads on our new service, Passport. When you pledge at the $60 level in a year, $5 a month, you will have access to all of our programs on our online site, Passport, PBS Passport, and we will give you credentials for that, and you can watch all of these programs at the time of your choosing on the device of your choosing. So those are all available to you from us here at Montana PBS, our way of saying thanks for partnering with us to make this service viable. The number is right there on your screen. We're going to go right back to the program. The number is 1-800-426-8243.
On November 29, 1864, Colonel John Chivington, leading a ruthless volunteer cavalry, attacked Black Kettle's peaceful Cheyenne village in southeastern Colorado Territory. They killed and horribly mutilated nearly 200 Native Americans, most of them women and children.
Damn any man who sympathizes with Indians. Kill and scalp all, big and little. Nits make lice.
As a result of Sand Creek, various tribes began attacking along the Platte River Road the following spring and summer. Large numbers then moved north to the Powder River country. Here, they coalesced around the Lakota Sioux warrior Red Cloud. The seeds of a unified Indian resistance were sprouting. Red Cloud was born in 1822 near the confluence of the Blue and Platte Rivers, east of today's North Platte, Nebraska. His father was killed when Red Cloud was young, and he was brought up by his uncle, Chief Old Smoke. As a young man, he demonstrated his fearlessness, his ruthlessness, and leadership during wars against the Pawnee, Crow, and other tribes. In one battle, he saved a Ute warrior from a river drowning, only to drag him on shore, then kill and scalp him. When he was just 19, he killed one of his uncle's rivals, Bull Bear. By 1864, he had been in more than 80 battles. His growing reputation as a military strategist, negotiator, and orator elevated him even more in Lakota society.
Red Cloud, he managed to unite quite a few of the Lakota bands together, and also to bring in Cheyenne and some of the Arapaho. Without his force of personality and his vision, I don't think the Indian opposition would be near as strong as it was.
By spring 1865, with the increase of continued Indian attacks, the Bozeman Trail was shut down to immigrant traffic, but not to the military. Now that the Civil War had ended, the U.S. government increased its forces along western trails, including the Bozeman Trail. Major General Grenville Dodge had orders for Brigadier General Patrick Connor.
Settle the Indian troubles this season. Make vigorous war upon the Indians and punish them so that they will be forced to keep the peace.
In August of 1865, Connor did just that with 2,400 troops of the Powder River Expedition.
Connor himself comes up Bozeman Trail. He was ordered to establish a fort, so he establishes what's first Fort Connor, and then becomes Fort Reno later that fall in 1865 down on Powder River, and that's the first of the Bozeman Trail forts. And so that's supposed to be a permanent thing right here in the heart of the Indian country to keep them under control. And then he goes off hunting for Indians. He's led by quite a few famous scouts, and Jim Bridger again being the most famous of them.
Connor and his soldiers marched north. As they approached the Tongue River, Bridger saw smoke rising in the distance and alerted Connor to Indians. They attacked a peaceful northern Arapaho village of about 500 early in the morning of August 29th, burning the lodges and winter provisions. Many of the warriors were absent, off on a raid against the Crow. At least 60 Arapaho were killed, many of them women and children.
I think, when you look at Connor attacking that Arapaho camp, who was led by Medicine Man, the Arapahos were not necessarily ready to go to war until after that. That just galvanized them and said, we've got to join this movement. If we don't join this, we're going to continue to see these atrocities.
It was the beginning of the Indian Wars here, and the beginning of the real heavy bloodshed along the Bozeman Trail.
In 1866, the Bozeman Trail was once again open to immigrant and other non-military travel. But now many of the wagons were driven by freighters and teamsters moving merchandise, equipment, and livestock. Fewer prospectors were traveling, their places taken by merchants, professionals, craftsmen, and others wanting to provide goods and services to the now burgeoning mining towns. Opportunity was knocking. They were off to mine the miners. But by an official order on February 28, 1866, all wagon trains were required to get permission to travel. Indian trouble was still on everyone's mind. So much so that in the spring of 1866, Cheyenne, Sioux, and Arapaho bands were invited to a peace conference at Fort Laramie. Nearly 2,000 showed up. The peace commissioners were certain a deal allowing safe passage on the Bozeman Trail could be reached. Red Cloud was one of many influential leaders in attendance. He too was optimistic an agreement could be attained. But the peace commissioners and the U.S. military were not on the same page.
He'd made up his mind that he wasn't going to fight anymore, that he really did want to try to secure a peace. And no sooner than they sat down, and then the scouts come in and say there's a column of soldiers coming up the river.
It was the U.S. 18th Infantry led by Colonel Henry Carrington. He had orders to re-garrison Fort Reno and build 2 more forts along the Bozeman Trail to help protect wagon trains and establish a military presence in the region.
Red Cloud was furious. He picked up and he left and said he would never sign a treaty with the United States government.
Abruptly leaving the Fort Laramie Treaty negotiations, Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes later gathered at Red Cloud's encampment. At the annual Sundance ceremony, they vowed to fight against white incursion. Carrington headed north with 700 soldiers, 300 civilians, and 226 wagons filled with tons of supplies and equipment to stock and build forts along the Bozeman Trail. Most of the troops were raw recruits, unskilled in Indian warfare. They were mostly armed with outdated single-shot muzzle-loading muskets. Carrington himself was an odd choice as a commander in hostile Indian country, but he had connections within the military and the government and was a good engineer and manager.
Colonel Carrington was from a very well-to-do family, an aristocratic family. Carrington, during the Civil War, was pretty much a desk officer. So he had no combat experience, and that was one of the big raps on him by some of the men who were veterans of the Civil War when he was ordered to build forts up here in this country.
Carrington proceeded to come north, and they, at Fort Reno, they rebuilt on that and re-garrisoned it, and then went up to Fort Phil Kearny. They built that, and then in that August of 1866, another 2 companies of troops went up and built Fort C.F. Smith, which is 90 miles north of Fort Phil Kearny.
When the military started building forts in this area, that was kind of like the last straw for them. And you know, the combination of Sand Creek and the aftermath of that just heightened the need to try to keep these people out of our land, keep them out of our territory.
Once the military committed to building 3 forts on the Bozeman Trail, the Lakota and the Northern Cheyenne and the Arapaho, they saw that as occupation. They saw that as humiliation.
By midsummer, war parties of Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Northern Arapaho were camped in the valleys of the Tongue and Rosebud Rivers. Among the warriors were a young Crazy Horse, American Horse, and Red Cloud, who spoke out against the military.
Hear ye, Dakotas! When the Great Father at Washington asked for a path through our hunting grounds, we were told that they wished merely to pass through. Our old chiefs thought to show their goodwill, promising to protect the wayfarers. Yet before the ashes of the council fire are cold, the Great Father is building his forts among us. His presence here is an insult to the spirits of our ancestors. Dakotas, I am for war.
Fort Phil Kearny was the largest of the 3 Bozeman Trail forts. It was located near Piney Creek, about halfway between present-day Sheridan and Buffalo, Wyoming.
They arrive in July of 1866 on Friday the 13th and decide that this is the best place to set up the largest stockaded fort in the West. It was a massive undertaking. Carrington does a really good job selecting where the fort should be placed.
This is the most beautiful place for a fort that I've seen west of Fort Leavenworth. Its mountain scenery is most striking and majestic, with its beautiful range of hills on either side, north and south, as it were throwing their arms around and clasping one in their bosom. William Thomas.
So the location, while you can see it's beautiful and it gives you a great vista and a view of the land around you, there's no wood, and so they had to send civilians and ultimately soldiers to protect the civilians miles away to cut wood, to bring it to be able to build the entire perimeter of the fort and all of the structures inside of the fort. So that was a real problem.
45 wagon boxes go out every day, 45 full past them, 540 mules just to service the wood train. Massive wood gathering effort going through.
At its peak, Fort Phil Kearny encompassed 17 acres and numerous structures, including officer, enlisted man, and civilian quarters, a hospital, mess hall, stables, shops, and 2 sawmills. 400 troops and 150 civilians inhabited this fortress on the Little Piney Creek in the heart of Indian country. By the end of July 1866, All wagon trains arriving at the slowly emerging fort were required to consolidate into larger trains before proceeding. More military trains were also on the trail, often traveling with immigrant trains to protect them. Everyone was much more alert to danger. Livestock were heavily guarded, and men rarely wandered off alone to hunt or fish.
The military moves in, and the Indians knew there was a war. So by 1866, the Indians were attacking, and there was 1 week in July when 24 civilians and soldiers were killed in attacks all along the trail from the North Platte to the Bighorn River.
William Thomas, traveling with the 1866 Kirkendall wagon train, was preoccupied with immigrant graves along the route. By the time he reached the site of the new Fort Phil Kearny, he was filled with ominous feelings about traveling through Indian country on the Bozeman Trail.
I am meditating upon the advantage that I am about to take, counting the cost, summing up the danger. Cold chills run through my blood. William Thomas.
Arriving at the Bighorn River without incident, the word around camp was no more danger from Indians, for they were now in Crow country. So after crossing, Thomas put his faith in God and left the small Kirkendall train with his 8-year-old son, Charlie, and hired driver. Over the next 6 days, they journeyed to the Yellowstone River alone.
This site is kind of a sad story to tell. William Thomas was a farmer back in Illinois, and he'd lost his 2 daughters and his wife sometime before 1866. He and his son decided to come west. Can you imagine, though, going through this country without even one firearm? He was a religious man, and he thought the good maker was going to take care of him. They'd finally made it to the Yellowstone. They felt safe. They built a campfire. They had a little celebration. Unfortunately, Indians caught him here, killed he and his son and the hired man. Shortly after, the miners came down with their wagon train, and they found the bodies. The Bozeman Trail has many sad stories, and this is just one of them.
Perhaps the most daring group to use the Bozeman Trail in 1866 was its last. Nelson Story, a mule packer, had struck it rich at Alder Gulch. Always the entrepreneur, he saw a need for beef in the new Montana Territory and went to Texas with $10,000 to buy cattle. Story bought 1,000 head of cattle at bargain rates in the devastated post-Civil War Texas economy. Then, along with 25 hired hands, he drove them up through Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and over to Wyoming and the Bozeman Trail. Along the way, his outfit was attacked by Indians on the Dry Fork of the Powder River. 2 of his men were injured, 1 died, and about 30 head of cattle were stolen. After leaving the injured at Fort Reno, Story and his men tracked down and killed the Indians and recovered the cattle.
He shot the place up pretty good, and that was something that years later he felt a little upset about it, but it turns out that's probably the best thing he could have ever done. It's probably saved the life of his entire crew.
Story arrived at Fort Phil Kearny in October 1866 without further incident, but was ironically delayed by military order because of anticipated Indian trouble. After 2 weeks, he finally had enough. In the dead of the night, he left the fort and continued his cattle drive up the Bozeman Trail, fending off 2 more Indian attacks along the way. Stopping near present-day Livingston, Montana in December 1866, Story eventually sold some of his stock at a huge profit and established cattle ranching in Montana with the rest.
Sets up a cow camp between Livingston and Bozeman, and started running cows into Paradise Valley because it was actually pretty good weather down that way. But his main operation was out of Bozeman. And he also had an operation, of course, in Virginia City and Nevada City.
Variously described as a fearless tough guy, a scoundrel, and a robber baron, he was also said to be generous, intelligent, and compassionate.
If he got mad at you, he might actually pistol whip you. But at the same time, if you needed help, he'd buy you a house.
Nelson Story eventually settled in Bozeman, Montana, and became its first millionaire, with interest not only in cattle, but flour mills, banks, stores, and real estate. He was a good friend of John Bozeman, who by 1866 had solidly established himself in the town that bore his name.
He was involved in many businesses. He was an entrepreneur, he was involved in civic activities, and he had lots of contacts.
In April 1867, friend and flour mill owner Tom Coover talked Bozeman into going to Fort C.F. Smith with him to secure government contracts. Bozeman had serious misgivings about the trip, but after much pressuring, he finally agreed to go.
The Gallatin Valley was already in a panic in spring 1867 when John Bozeman and Tom Coover set out to go to Fort C.F. Smith. That spring, there were rumors of Indian threats that would come over the mountains and attack into the Gallatin Valley. So John Bozeman was very apprehensive about this trip.
We're standing in Katy Coulee. The Yellowstone River is 300 yards that direction. This is kind of an interesting place in Montana history. It's told that Bozeman had a bad feeling about what was going to happen in front of him. They stopped here in this coulee, right where we are, very close, to have lunch. While they were eating lunch, 5 Piegan Indians showed up. They signaled that they were hungry and they wanted to eat. They came into camp. They were offered food. At that time, the Indians drew their arms and killed Bozeman. His partner was still armed and fought his way and hid in the brush and escaped.
Upon hearing of Bozeman's death, Nelson Story sent one of his men to the scene of the crime to look around. He reported that there were no signs of Indians or Indian pony tracks around Katy Coulee. Coover's wound was said to have had powder burns, which could have been self-inflicted. This led some to believe Coover himself killed Bozeman. Others pointed to business foes or jealous husbands. But Indian culprits remain the most plausible explanation. A burial party soon arrived, and John Bozeman, age 32, was interred on the spot next to the Yellowstone River. 2 years later, Nelson Story had Bozeman's body dug up and reinterred at the Story family plot at Sunset Hills Cemetery in Bozeman, Montana. His marker stands to this day, and the questions about his death still swirl.
So he died the tragic young hero of the story, which I think has added to a lot to the ambiance, if you will, the romance of his persona. If he had lived on, it would have been interesting to see what he would have done with his life.
The news of Bozeman's death on April 18, 1867, served to inflame already smoldering fears that an Indian attack on the Gallatin Valley was imminent, even though the dominant tribe in the area was relatively friendly Crow. It raised such a furor among Bozeman's new citizens that the federal government established Fort Ellis just east of town in August of 1867. Purchases of provisions by the fort and patronage by its soldiers in town pumped more than $30,000 per year into the fledgling Bozeman economy. That's nearly $500,000 in today's currency. Without Fort Ellis, the town of Bozeman might not have survived its formative years. The Bozeman Trail will return in a moment. Please support your PBS station by becoming a member and pledging your financial gift to keep programs like this on the air.
So welcome back, and thank you for joining us tonight. If you just joined us, my name is Christina Martin. I'm the Director of Development for Montana PBS, and we're here tonight viewing the premiere screening of The Bozeman Trail with the film's producer, Tom Manning.
And my name is Aaron Pruitt. I'm the general manager here at Montana PBS, and we're just delighted that you're joining us for this great broadcast of a local story, and actually with some mystery around the end of John Bozeman. But it's far from the end of the trail.
Yeah, John Bozeman dies at 32 years of age, but that's not the end of the story, because things are starting to ramp up along the Bozeman Trail. We see from the last segment, we saw the establishment of forts, we saw the military dig in. Things start to get worse. There have been some Indian attacks, but there are many more to come. There's a real fight on everybody's hand.
So don't go away. That's all ahead of us yet. One more segment of the Bozeman Trail yet to come. But thank you for those pledge calls right now. That's what this is all about.
Love hearing those phones ring.
Yeah.
It's really gratifying to me as a producer, too, to have you folks call in like this. All your calls are so appreciated. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have the storytellers come on to set with us and know that we are connecting with you, the viewers out there at Montana PBS, and that you want to learn about Montana's history and to hear these stories. So when you do that, we will send you a thank you gift for pledging your membership to Montana PBS. The number is there on your screen, 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS. Newman's Own Foundation knows the value of independent public media, and now they're challenging you to make an ongoing monthly donation to Montana PBS by becoming a sustaining member. For every new sustainer, they'll match the donation dollar for dollar. With your support, we can continue bringing your favorite shows, channels, and experiences right to you. Giving back has never been easier. So call us today or go to the website to set up your monthly donation as a new sustaining member and double your impact. Newman's Own Foundation will match the donations of every new sustainer in 2019, up to a total of $50,000. You can double the impact of your gift by becoming a sustaining member today. You'll be forming a strong foundation of reliable support with your ongoing monthly donations to Montana PBS. You'll be able to double the difference, and you can make and become a sustaining member today. Exceptional public television is free for everyone, but it's not free to create. And just like your own household bills, the cost of bringing you the shows you care about at Montana PBS can be substantial. That's why it's important that you give to Montana PBS now, building a strong foundation of reliable support to uphold the local programs that you enjoy. When you donate today as a monthly sustaining member, you'll be here for Montana PBS now and for the future. Best of all, you will be providing a steady stream of support to public broadcasting, ensuring programs like the Bozeman Trail continue to have a place on TV. It takes just a few minutes to sign up as a sustainer, and know that you will be supporting Montana PBS programs with your reliable and consistent contribution, allowing the station to plan for future projects. And the Newman's Own Foundation will match dollar for dollar every new sustaining membership right now. Make your difference. Please give us a call now at 1-800-426-8243, and our Delta Gamma fraternity volunteers will help you over the phone, or go online now to donate at montanapbs.org. Thank you. Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
So thank you again for being with us tonight, and thank you for those phones that are ringing. We really appreciate your support. Again, we're here tonight with Tom Manning, the filmmaker of the Bozeman Trail, and I'm just learning so much watching this film. Having grown up in Montana, I thought I knew more about the state than I actually do, and I'm really struck with the contrast between Nelson's story and John Bozeman.
Yeah,
if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's an interesting contrast. Basically, Nelson's story is everything that John Bozeman wanted to be. He's the successful gold miner in Alder Gulch. He made a fortune in Alder Gulch, while Bozeman was trying to scout the trail, and he had no opportunity at Alder Gulch. So Bozeman was a failed gold miner. Nelson's story wasn't. He took his money and had this tremendous cattle drive. He became Montana's first millionaire. Bozeman wanted all of this, but somehow it was always just out of his grasp. He couldn't quite attain the fame and fortune that Nelson's story, but of course his name still lives on today, so a certain amount of fame certainly lives on with John Bozeman too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As a native Montanan and a native Bozemanite, I guess it's really exciting for me to learn more about Jim Bridger and the Bridger Mountains and how that naming came, and John Bozeman. And I think about having grown up and going through my history classes and my K-12 education. And one of the fun things that we're going to do with this film is we're going to break it into small segments and put it on our PBS Learning Media, which is a national resource site for educators all across the nation, but we also use it here in Montana. We will do education plans, and we will do 8 to 10 minute segments that are suitable for showing in the classroom to teach the next generation about the Bozeman Trail and the challenges we're about to learn about in the next segment with Red Cloud and how the Indians were going to defend their land. And these are really great stories that the next generations of Montanans need to hear. And your film is going to help us do that.
It's a great use of the program. I love it. Multi-use.
This is one of the things that we do at Montana PBS is, we are an educational licensee. That's in our name as broadcasters and in our DNA is to be educational. And at the same time, we like to tell entertaining and great storytelling. And Tom's helped us that with writing a great script tonight and drawing us into the story. And there is some really interesting things yet to come, the big battles of the trail. So don't go away. Thank you for those calls, by the way. That's
support
great.
From our viewers makes all of this possible, from Bozeman Trail to the educational programming to the programming you know and love.
So we are taking those calls right now. In fact, the folks taking those calls are the Delta Gamma alumni. We appreciate them volunteering their time. And tonight they have challenged you, if you're a member of Delta Gamma fraternity currently or an alum, if you pledge tonight, they will match your pledge dollar for dollar. And what a great way to support Montana PBS. And we thank them for that. And we hope that that inspires you to call. The number to call is right there on your screen. It's 1-800-426-8243.
Become a member of Montana PBS today and receive one of these thank you gifts. For a monthly gift of $8 or one-time gift of $96, you'll receive an historic map of the Bozeman Trail and a copy of the full documentary on DVD. For $120 or a monthly gift of $10, you'll receive your choice of book, The Bloody Bozeman by Dorothy M. Johnson, or the autobiography of Red Cloud, and the historic map. For $15 a month or a one-time gift of $180, you'll receive the DVD, choice of book, and the historic map. And for $240 or $20 a month, you'll receive the DVD, both books, and map. Please call 1-800-426-8243 or visit montanapbs.org now and support your Montana PBS.
So thanks for being with us again. Before we continue, I'd like to say a few thank yous to people who have called in tonight. Denise Andres from Bozeman, Montana, thank you so much for your support of Montana PBS. James from Billings, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Veronica from Billings, with your pledge of support.
I have Linda from Kalispell, thank you, and Jim Jarvis from Virginia City, thanks for calling in. You appear in the film. Appreciate your pledge tonight, Jim.
Also to Michael from Three Forks, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
So coming up very soon, we're going back to the film. And one of the interesting things about, well, the military is becoming a big part of this story. They're moving in, they're building forts, but there's a weakness to where they build the forts. And that's a kind of a critical thing. And that weakness is?
The weakness is wood.
Yes.
They select sites for, especially for Fort Phil Kearny. They select a site that is miles from the nearest timber source. And so they have to mount a huge, huge program of bringing wood in to build this fort. Now, Fort C.F. Smith was made out of adobe. And so they didn't have that problem up there. None of the forts still exist today. Fort Phil Kearny has been rebuilt, and I encourage people that want to delve into the history a little bit more to go down to Fort Phil Kearny. It's kind of maybe 10 miles south of Sheridan, and it's just a fascinating site. The folks there have done a terrific job in recreating the experience.
Well.
Oh yeah, we did a lot of filming around Fort Phil Kearny, and it's just a great historical site to visit. You can also visit the Custer Battlefield on your way down. So lots of history in that part of Montana.
So certainly tonight we're celebrating Montana history, Wyoming history, and the story of the West here. And of course, one of the ways that we do that is sending you, so that you can dive in further if you'd like to, is sending you these great books or the DVD itself that you can share with your family and send to friends, or the map that we have. All of these are wonderful thank yous. The Buddy Bozeman here was a great resource to you, as I know the Red Cloud book as well was for the making of the film. And this is our way of thanking you for your support of Montana PBS, and also furthering the education of all of us about this region that we live in. And I was fascinated to understand that Fort Ellis came along, and understanding how, I think at one point in the film you mentioned that Bozeman might not look at all like it was today if Fort Ellis hadn't been built as a.
The soldiers really patronized the town, and
Nelson Story got into that mix as well.
Yes, and they pumped a lot of money into Bozeman. And so who knows what it would have turned out if Fort Ellis wasn't there.
We talked a little bit, and you kind of mentioned this early on, that the Bozeman Trail, ultimately didn't achieve the goals that John Bozeman had for it over at time in terms of being the shortcut.
Right.
And yet, Bozeman, Montana exists, and yet, and I've had people say, well, maybe the trail was successful, but we still have this very vibrant community and an ag community here, and a college, and a lot of things have happened. But it's interesting to see how it all came about and how it got started.
From way back in 1863.
Right. And decisions from just which direction the wagon train was going to go, and it changed the names, it changed everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, we hope that you are enjoying this. Again, thank you. All the phones are busy right now.
That's great. Thanks.
That's just very reaffirming to all of us that Montana history is important to you. Educational programming is important, and we encourage you to call the number you see there on your screen.
The number is 800-426-8243. You can also go online at montanapbs.org and make your pledge.
As the travel season of 1866 ended, Red Cloud's coalition of tribes increasingly attacked areas around the forts that autumn. They occurred on an almost daily basis.
It begins this kind of a slow bleeding process. You'd see Indians around the hills every day. You'd send out wood cutting parties to go cut the wood. The Indians, and they would clash in the woods. You would send out parties to take out stock to graze them. The Indians would attack and capture what stock they could. So it just was continual hit and run tactics, and those would continue really throughout the fall.
Although they knew that these forts had been built, some of them would be impenetrable, but they knew that they could attack the supply wagons and they could continue to harass anybody who was coming into the region. And that was basically the plan.
And that's what led basically to the Fetterman fight. It was also the result of the wagon box fight later on, the need for wood.
At Fort Phil Kearny, during the autumn of 1866, Carrington's officers included Lieutenant George Drummond, Captain Tenador Ten Ike, Captain Fred Brown, and Captain James Powell. Captain Brown was obsessed with chasing down Indians, which he did on a regular basis. Powell was a grizzled veteran who worked his way up through the ranks. He suffered from lead poisoning with musket balls still in his body from the Civil War. Grumman was a hothead who would dash into any battle, and Ten Eyck was in poor health after time spent in a Civil War prison camp. These officers were in charge of an infantry and cavalry comprised of fairly green recruits, poorly armed with mostly single-shot muskets and untested in Indian warfare. Even the officers, good soldiers during the Civil War, were unprepared for the guerrilla tactics of the Sioux Alliance in the unfamiliar and unforgiving landscape of the Powder River country. But they were soon joined by one more. Captain William J. Fetterman was a rising star in the military. A decorated Civil War officer, he was in line for a promotion, possibly the new commander of Fort Phil Kearny or Fort C.F. Smith.
They were thrilled when Fetterman showed up at the fort because that was the moment when they knew that they could start to professionalize militarily. He was such a high-ranking officer, had such great administration and leadership skills from the war that they knew that he would be able to come in and bring some discipline to what they felt was the disorder of having to build rather than protect, which is what they were going to have to be ready to do.
On December 21st, they sent out a wood train. It was the last wood train they were going to send out for the season.
On this particular day, Red Cloud's coalition would attempt to decoy the military over Lodge Trail Ridge and down into the draws and gullies below. There, 1,500 warriors lay hidden, ready to spring the trap.
The Indians knew the terrain very well, and they knew where they could hide, and the soldiers wouldn't see them.
The signal came from up on the signal hill that wood train was under assault. And so a relief column was put together, and they took so many from various companies, mostly a lot of them from Fetterman's personal company. And then Fetterman, by right of seniority, wanted the captainship.
Under cloudy skies and fairly mild temperatures, Fetterman and 49 infantry moved out that winter solstice day to support the wood train. They were overtaken shortly by 27 cavalry riders, led by Grumman and Brown. 2 civilians, Wheatley and Fisher, accompanied the cavalry, eager to try out their new Henry 16-shot repeating rifles. The cavalry carried 7-shot Spencer repeating carbines. Fetterman's soldiers were armed only with obsolete Springfield muzzleloaders. Before Fetterman left, Carrington supposedly gave orders not to cross Lodge Trail Ridge because the rest of the company wouldn't be able to support such a move.
So Fetterman comes out with his 80 men, Fetterman and Grumman and Brown. All of a sudden, once they got out of the fort here and came around to the front, they could see the signalman on Pilot Hill saying, "Wood train's not under attack anymore. It's safe." Fetterman was a Civil War veteran, and whenever there were changing battle scenarios, that changed the orders, and you didn't have time to go get permission. He was too good an officer to just disobey orders because he didn't like his commanding officer, or because he was arrogant and a fire eater like he's been portrayed. He was not like that.
Crazy Horse, American Horse, and a handful of others attempted to lure the soldiers over the ridge. Red Cloud may have been watching the plan unfold from a high vantage point nearby.
Fetterman does go over the ridge. Grumman and the cavalry went over first. And so he hears what's happening over the ridge, likely knew that there was activity, great activity happening over the ridge. And in my opinion, he went over the ridge to relieve Grumman and the cavalrymen who were ahead.
They had no idea there were 1,500 Indians waiting in a well-staged ambush. They didn't understand the Indians' abilities to stage an ambush like that, to create a strategic and tactical scenario.
Hearing gunfire back at the fort, a relief column of infantry led by Tenador Ten Eyck was quickly organized. They marched to a ridge south of the battle to get a view of the conflict.
It started to die down. The time that Ten Eyck reached the ridge above to look down, all he saw was Indians. And what they said looked like white logs, which were the bodies, stripped bodies. So it was over very quick, and a very complete victory.
All 81 men were wiped out and their bodies mutilated in a perfectly executed attack. Brown had a bullet through his temple, possibly self-inflicted, or perhaps a mercy killing by Fetterman. American Horse claimed to have personally killed Fetterman. The bodies were mutilated because of spiritual beliefs that a maimed enemy would be weaker when met again in the afterlife. Only Adolph Metzger, the bugler, was left intact and covered reverently with a buffalo robe. The Indians later claimed that he was honored for his extreme bravery during the battle, in the end even using his bugle as a weapon to defend himself.
This was the most successful strategic plan that any of the Plains Indians had ever pulled off.
As troops went out to retrieve bodies after the Fetterman massacre, the temperature plunged, the wind spiked, and snow began to swirl. A blizzard was on the way. Back at the fort, it was feared that the stockade itself might be assailed by the Indians. So a plan was made should an attack occur. The remaining soldiers would defend the fort, while women and children would be sent to the ammunition magazine for safety. If a breach of the fort occurred, the magazine would be blown up, rather than subjecting them to the mutilation seen on the battlefield.
Listening to the carpenters making coffins for the soldiers while it's sub-zero, and just the abject misery and not hearing, because they don't have telegraph, not knowing whether anybody even knows what their situation is. I can't imagine the tension and stress of the people who remained in the fort.
Under these dire circumstances, Carrington asked for civilian volunteers to ride with news of the massacre and plea for reinforcements. John Portuguese Phillips stepped forward, and later that evening of December 21st, began a journey to the Horseshoe Station Telegraph, near present-day Glendo, Wyoming, about 190 miles away. Persevering bitterly cold temperatures and driving wind-blown snow, he arrived on Christmas morning and sent a message of the disaster to Fort Laramie. Phillips then continued another 40 miles to Fort Laramie, arriving late that night during a festive military ball. Due to the continuing foul weather, full reinforcements didn't depart until January 6th. But an attack on Fort Phil Kearny never happened. Phillips, near total collapse, recuperated in the post hospital for 2 weeks. His legendary ride lives on to this day. In January 1867, there was another ride through difficult conditions. Because of Army reorganization, Colonel Carrington had new orders to report to Fort Caspar. He was accompanied by his wife Margaret and a contingent of soldiers as they braved their way through snow, wind, and temperatures near 40 below.
Colonel Carrington and all of his remaining men from his battalion have to march through this blizzard with their wives and spouses and families to get out of the Bozeman Trail area. Men lost their feet. The wives described this just agony of riding in these ambulances, freezing, trying to burn wood.
In the aftermath of the massacre, Henry Carrington faced courts of inquiries, congressional hearings, and special commissions, all looking into what happened. There was false evidence and subterfuge from all quarters.
There's multiple year-long investigations from the Army and from Congress and from the Office of Indian Affairs trying to figure out what happened. All of these studies started initially to point at Colonel Carrington and his weak leadership.
Carrington defended himself by blaming Fetterman for disobeying orders not to cross Lodge Trail Ridge and portrayed him as generally reckless. Over the years, historians would amplify the story of an ambitious and reckless Fetterman. They would attribute an infamous quote to him: "With 80 men, I could ride through the entire Sioux Nation." But whether he ever uttered that phrase, or whether that famous order not to cross Lodge Trail Ridge ever reached Fetterman's ears, is still disputed to this day. General Ulysses S. Grant moved to court-martial Carrington, but at the suggestion of his friend, General William T. Sherman, a court of inquiry exonerated Carrington, and later an investigation by the Department of the Interior found no culpability. In 1908, Henry Carrington and his second wife, Frances, were honored in Sheridan, Wyoming. Carrington spoke at the Fetterman Massacre Site Memorial, still blaming Fetterman for the disaster. He died at the age of 88 in 1912.
All along, he just felt like he was wrongfully blamed. He spent his entire adult life trying to clear his reputation.
The result of the Fetterman Massacre, what the Indians called the Battle of the Hundred in the Hand, made immigrant travel impossible after 1866. The threat of attack was simply too great. For the next 2 years, the Bozeman Trail became a military road between the forts. In July 1867, after their annual sun dance, Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors decided to attack soldiers around Fort C.F. Smith and Fort Phil Kearny. Red Cloud was again instrumental in the planning. The ensuing hayfield and wagon box fights took place just one day apart, August 1st and 2nd, 1867. In these fights, about 30 armed men, fighting from behind barricades, defended themselves against hundreds of Indians. Both engagements had the same outcome. In the wagon box fight near Fort Phil Kearny, Captain James Powell commanded just 30 soldiers against nearly 400 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors led by Red Cloud. The battle lasted over 8 hours until help arrived.
The Indians made their initial charge, and their idea normally would have been to charge the corral, and at about 100, 150 yards, the Indians would kind of duck behind their horse. And that's when they expected the soldiers to shoot. And then the Indians would jump up and then put the gas on and jump the wagons and kill the soldiers inside the corral.
The short, stout Indian bow was primarily used from horseback during buffalo hunts. Deadly at short range, these weapons were not very effective at a distance.
The soldiers, instead of having muzzle loaders, now had breech loading, what was called Allen conversions. And all they had to do is pop up the breech, insert a new round in, and close the breech and shoot. So unlike the muzzle loader, which could fire about 2 rounds a minute, these could fire closer to like 10 rounds a minute. And that was a real shock to the warriors that were charging the corral, because they expected the soldiers to be delayed muzzle loading their rifles. And instead they fired again, and they fired again and again. And the Indians broke off their assault.
The battle at the hayfield, the wagon box fight, and I think that in those engagements, the Lakota people went away in bewilderment.
The wagon box and hayfield fights were the last major engagements of Red Cloud's war. The outcome of the battles discouraged native warriors from attempting additional large-scale attacks against government forces. And so, for the remainder of 1867, the Lakota and their allies concentrated on small-scale hit-and-run attacks along the Bozeman Trail.
By 1868, with the completion of the railroad across southern Wyoming, the trail was no longer needed. It was built for a shortcut and a cheap way to get people from the Oregon Trail to Virginia City.